Hello, everybody. Anna Sabramowicz here. So awesome of you to join me today. Now, this is going to be video one of a three-part series of where interactive stories add the most value and where you should use them to augment the learning experience. Because as far as I'm concerned, nothing is a silver bullet, right? Everything is a part of a larger campaign of learning. Just like one of my, favorite people, Jim Rohn, said that in order to actually really understand something, you probably have to be exposed to that information at least, 7 times. And so a single interactive experience, a single scenario, a job aid, it's not going to permanently embed itself in your workflow, but consistent exposure will help. But today, what I want to focus on is one of the 4 out of 12, I believe, places where interactive stories really add a ton of value. And the reason I'm doing this is because what I want you to do is pitch these and become so successful at pitching them, and then get all these projects that are based on interactive storytelling, which is going to be awesome. But then you're going to go, oh, I really need to jump on the call with Anna and join her community so that I can now develop this amazing thing that I promised I would. So that would be awesome. So the purpose of this is just to get you stoked, excited, pumped to really share these, the potential of these projects with your stakeholders and clients, and then jump on with me and we can work on those projects together. Sound good? All right. So I have 4 for you today. The first one is the Netflix effect. Okay, so, and I just came up with this, but one of the things that Netflix found, and I don't remember when way back, I'm kind of dating myself, but initially what happened is Netflix had this, when they were still, physical CDs and DVDs were being rented, what happened is you would choose the things that you wanted to watch. And there's a difference between the Netflix watchers that we believe we are versus the reality. So what would happen is, you'd go to choose your categories and you'd be like, of course, my favorite things to watch is documentaries and British drama because I'm a sophisticated, refined person. But in reality, when you actually went down to, choose what was happening in the moment, when you've got the pizza and beer and the popcorn ready, really what happens is I'm watching romantic comedies and anything that Fast and Furious has put out, one of the 9. So what happens is, and you're like, how does that relate to interactive stories? What I want you to think about, and this happens like a lot of the time, and I've watched users choose things in my interactive experiences, which is basically, they're presented with a decision, and the decision is in context now to their work or whatever, right? One of the things that'll happen is people will make different decisions under different circumstances depending on the expectations that they place on themselves. And it's funny, one of my students said that she created a leadership interactive story for leaders, and she had her husband go through it, and she's watching him go through it, and she's like, wait, you're choosing all the right answers. This isn't a good interactive experience. And he said, and what I thought was really telling, he said that the reason he chose those things is because he knew that she expected him to choose those things in the moment. But he said in the moment, he doesn't actually do those things because he's more reactive. And I thought that was really telling because it reminded me of that Netflix thing where we see expectations, but it's not necessarily what we do in reality. And that's one of the things I think that makes a really well-crafted, independent learning activity where nobody's observing you way more powerful than if you're doing something like in a workshop or in a group, because the pressure and the expectations that you think others have will make you think differently. Instead of being more reactive and more lost in the story, you feel like you're being observed. And I think that observation is actually in some ways detrimental to somebody getting immersed in that story and losing themselves in a way that they can actually be influenced to think about things a little bit differently. So I think that's why interactive stories are great, is because they can provide that individual experience and have somebody experiment with things they might not necessarily always be comfortable experimenting with, because nobody is watching, nobody is judging them. So think about that. That's a great, I think that's a huge bonus of having any even live experience or virtual instructor-led training on Zoom, augmented by a self-paced, immersive, interactive experience like that. Okay, so speaking of, let's say you are running live sessions, or you are getting to a workshop. This is one of the things, common experience. This is one of the things that, especially with adult audiences, you cannot guarantee the breadth of like experience in that room. Or especially if you're like, let's say you're doing leadership training, you can't guarantee that every single person in there has had the opportunity to mentor, the opportunity to hire or fire or deal with something disruptive. Like there's just such a gamut, right? I mean, that's what's beautiful about adult learners, is that they bring so much of their own experience and like the work that they've already done is reflected. You can actually pull on it, but it makes it kind of difficult because then you can't speak to a common experience, right? Some people will resonate, some will not. Well, this is what's amazing. What you can do is, with an interactive story, you can actually present everybody, even during the training. You can jump on their laptop and everybody can just do their thing and process the interactive experience on their own. And I think that is really cool, because then what happens is you all of a sudden have everybody's, let's say you can create an interactive story about some difficult leadership situations, or some difficult bullying situations, or hiring, firing, all kinds of, soft skill stuff, and also even software stuff, right? Which my students have done. So you're doing that, and all of a sudden now everybody has had definitely a personalized experience as they've gone through that interactive story. So that's cool, because they made the decisions based on their own experience. And then what happens is now they come and enter that room with ideas about how it should have been solved, how things should have worked out, how they did it, and why it was the best way or not the best way. And they're going to come into that experience, or your training or your workshop or whatever you're doing, the discussion, with questions, ideas, suggestions, opinions, all the things that before you would have maybe had to fabricate because you didn't know what the common experiences were. Show of hands, who's ever been a this, right? Now you know. And I think that is such an awesome hack. And I certainly didn't come up with that. I remember when I first checked out an interactive story by Doug Nelson, Connect with Haji Kamal, he said that what they did is, this was for Army training, everybody did that before they came to the live session. So because they couldn't guarantee that everybody had been deployed to Afghanistan, so they created an interactive experience where somebody was deployed and they had to make decisions. And now all of a sudden, everybody had this common experience that they could discuss and reflect on together, which was so cool and a great way to kick off another experience. So I think an interactive story can bookend really beautifully these kinds of immersive in-person experiences, but also create a way for you to not only set it up so that everybody has a common experience, but also then wrap it up and say, now how do we tackle this, right? Without the pressure of the group. So hope you're finding that useful. Okay, now, the other thing, time to process. So everybody's talking about inclusion, diversity, all those things these days, but what I want you to think about is that when we talk about those things, we really need to think about just different ways that people process information, right? Introverts versus extroverts, people who are who like to read versus who like to read and think. Like there's people who talk through ideas and people who need to write through ideas to understand them. So one of the things that I think really this allows you to do, an interactive story, is a way for you to, like, when you craft it well, it's words, it's pictures, it's a very immersive experience. And I think it gives people the time to process it and process that information in a way that makes sense to them. And so instead of throwing people into an experience and say, okay, how would you react here? I mean, if you're looking for the people who are into, reacting, who are comfortable reacting and who are comfortable with coming up ideas on their feet, that's great. Those people exist. But then there's a whole bunch of other people who like to go through something several times to think it through, think through things differently, or let things percolate. And even the people who are, good at thinking on their feet, they also should be good at letting things percolate and thinking through them before they act, right? That's a good practice for everybody. So one of the things that I think an interactive experience does, like that, an interactive story, is it creates an opportunity for somebody to process something without being put on the spot, so they can actually think about it. And you can accommodate different people's styles of thinking through information, like we should, by providing not only custom feedback and experience through that story, but also the time to think about it and think through it and go through it as many times as they want to. That's one of the beauties of this, is that if you don't get it right the first time, or you think you didn't get it right the first time, or you want to go through it with alternate paths, you can. And you can't necessarily do that with other things. So I think that's where it can augment, like I said, a lot of training that comes after. So, and are you ready for the fourth one? And I think the fourth one is actually probably like the killer app here, right? Listen, what do we all want? This is on everybody's mind. I mean, I put together a conference recently, and it was about engagement. And everybody is struggling for this because we are so distracted, because there's so many things vying for our attention, right? We're battling. Like every time you put something out, you are battling YouTube. You're battling, all the apps, all the social media. And that's why I think an interactive story can actually cut through all that. You do this well, and you're combining some of the most engaging elements ever for humanity, which is, if you think about it, storytelling. Right? Storytelling is so powerful. And the reason we maybe are enamored with all these other social media pieces is because they are focused on stories as well. So now if we leverage the power of story, which as far as I'm concerned, if you thought about it, storytelling has, everybody's saying we're a storytelling animal. The people who got stories at the very beginning, like imagine cavemen sitting in front of some dude or gal, they're painting on the wall, and they're showing, those old paintings of like the hunts, and they're showing how the animals are organized and what the warriors did or the hunters did in order to capture those animals and not die. And the people that were able to look at those abstractions or those visuals and then imagine themselves in that, if their brains had the capability to do that, those were the people who could take that lesson and survive, right? They could apply it in the field. They could be like, oh, I remember that story and this is what they did. And that abstraction, that was actually, this is how I'm applying it to my reality. And so what happened is the people who got stories, they got to live. The people who didn't get stories, they died. And therefore, the people that kept on surviving were people who were basically self-selecting for story, because stories are the best way to share information, especially if you have no written language yet. So it was oral, it was visual, there's a lot of that going on. So by now we are like hooked into, like if I say, let me tell you a story, you're already primed for that. Now all we're doing is we're harnessing something that is already awesome in our brain working, and we're using that to get deep engagement. Now, this is what's cool too. We are not just stopping there. With an interactive story, one of the things we're doing is, yes, we're using storytelling, but we're also giving people the power of choice, agency, autonomy. Being able to choose our own adventure is so juicy. It's so exciting. So imagine now we're taking these huge things, which is like storytelling, and we're taking it with the power of choice and autonomy. Those things combined, amazing, right? Like you're like, what? I get to choose how this is a great story already, but I get to choose how it goes. This is awesome. So you're doing that. Now, on top of that, you're not just doing that. you are adding an extra element. The extra element is a great user interface. The user interface could be amazing visuals that you're telling the story through, which is this novelty and this delight that people enjoy. Like some of the best apps delight their users with surprises and they're visually stunning. Guess what? We're doing that too. We're creating a seamless experience. We're creating this product that somebody just gets lost in and immersed in. And it's not, it's interesting because we're not doing this for entertainment. We're doing this to educate, but we are borrowing from some of the best places, right? Hollywood, like game development, like UX, UI development, all those things we're taking from those worlds what the best things are and putting them together into this amazing package. Now, that to me, I'm sold, right? Are you sold? So those are the 4 things. Netflix effect, remember, like what people choose is based on perception of what is expected. So isolation, keeping them, giving somebody the chance to process in their own space is actually really useful because there isn't that pressure. Creating a common experience for people where they can come into the room with already ideas and maybe some awareness of how they have experienced these things in the past, how they handle them, giving people time to process depending on how they work mentally and how they process information, how they best process information. And then of course that deep engagement. So these are all reasons why interactive stories add so much value. And like I said, this is 4 of 12. And so hopefully you found these ones useful. Let me know in the comments if you're finding these valuable or if you have further questions. Like I said, the reason I want you to get excited about this and comfortable talking about the value and the reasons why this is going to be so powerful to use to augment whatever other learning path you have is because I want you to get your stakeholders and your clients excited about this, and then you can jump on with me on a strategy session, and then we can figure out if you want to jump on to join our community of interactive storytellers who do this every day, who pitch these kinds of ideas every day. So underneath the video, there's going to be a link to schedule a call with me. I hope you get these projects. I hope you jump on with me even before you get these projects because you're so stoked about trying one out yourself. And I hope you enjoyed this and you join me. Make sure you subscribe so that you get a notification when I'm releasing number 2 and number 3 for more reasons of why interactive storytelling is like the best thing since sliced bread. All right, talk to you friends soon. Take care. Bye.